across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, for England and Wales, a blustery start with further heavy rain to come, followed by showers, and those showers developing fairly widely as we go into the Easter weekend. I suspect Good Friday, Saturday and Easter Day. Mostly we're going to see sunny spells and showers before more prolonged rain on Monday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win big. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GB-WIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debate, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, the UK votes for a ceasefire in Gaza at the UN Security Council, and two Jewish people from Israel are given a very, very hard time by Border Force. Have we effectively betrayed Israel? Small boat crossings. James cleverly boasting at the start of the year that the numbers were considerably down and his aim was to get it to zero. Well, so far this year, the numbers are up by 25%. Come in, James Cleverly. We'd love a comment from you. And a new poll out showing 60% of people think we should apologise for slavery. But I thought we'd already done that anyway. Before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. The top story this hour. President Biden has said this afternoon the search and rescue operation is now the top priority for the city after a ship crashed into Baltimore's main bridge, with all traffic into the busy port remaining on hold today. If you're watching on television, let's show you the moment the bridge in Baltimore was hit. It happened at around 1:30 in the morning local time, and it plunged. Cars, their drivers and construction workers into the water below with absolutely no warning. The ship's crew had notified the authorities of what's being described as a power outage on board, prompting construction workers on the bridge at the time to try to stop more traffic driving onto that collapsing bridge. Let's show you the live scene in Baltimore this afternoon, where those 6 construction workers that warned oncoming traffic to stay off the bridge unfortunately remain unaccounted for. President Biden, in a news conference this afternoon, promising the fast rebuilding of that bridge and federal funding to support the city. Here at home, GB News can reveal the number of small boats crossing the English Channel so far this year is now 25% higher than at the same time last year. Another 5 boats made the crossing this morning, with almost 300 illegal migrants on board, including a number of children. It takes the total number of migrants who've made the dangerous journey so far this year to just under 4,600. That's up from 3,700 at the same point last year. Chemical attack suspect Abdul Azadi was granted asylum in the UK by a judge despite concerns the sex offender was a liar with a criminal past. A range of previously confidential documents have shown for the first time the lengths Azadi has gone to prove he was a Christian convert. His body was pulled from the River Thames last month amid a major manhunt after he was suspected of dousing his ex-girlfriend with a corrosive chemical. Now, the London Mayor has condemned a Conservative Party advert, calling it an attempt to mislead voters. Here's part of that video, which suggested London had become a crime capital of the world under Sadiq Khan's leadership.
A 54% increase in knife crime since the Labour mayor seized power has the metropolis teetering on the brink of chaos.
Well, the video also warned of what it described as squads of ULEZ enforcers terrorising communities at the beck and call of their Labour masters. Well, the post was withdrawn after a backlash for using footage of a stampede in a New York subway, not London. It's now been replaced without those scenes, and it comes as the Conservative Susan Hall is set to challenge Sadiq Khan in the upcoming London mayoral election on the 2nd of May. Now, HMS Prince of Wales has returned to her home port of Portsmouth Harbour. It's after leading in the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. That is, of course, Exercise Steadfast Defender. The British warship was at the centre of a maritime mission involving more than 20,000 UK military personnel across Scandinavia and Northern Europe. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Well, historically, we have always been a great friend of Israel. Indeed, it was the Balfour Declaration in 1917 that set the blueprint for what we then saw emerge after World War II, the State of Israel. And we have been steadfast supporters of that country, as indeed have the Americans. But something significant has changed since October the 7th. And last night at the UN Security Council, we were one of the countries that voted for a ceasefire. Now, I'm pleased to say the one good thing was that it did demand the unconditional release of the hostages. But it's still surprising, given that it is stated Israeli policy that they will go after the Hamas terrorists. Surprising that we voted for that resolution in many ways. But David Cameron, Lord Cameron, as Foreign Secretary, has steadily been shifting that position. Add to that an incident that took place at Manchester Airport yesterday evening. 2 brothers, Nuria and Daniel Sharabi, were coming into the country from Israel. This is just a little snippet of the confrontation they had with Border Force.
The checks we need to conduct, okay? Nobody's saying that. Nobody has said that once. So knock the attitude off. We've made the decision and you're coming in. So just let us do the checks we need to do and keep quiet. Look at me. Okay, you clear with that? Okay. Good. We're the bosses, not you, all right?
Well, fairly sharp, wasn't it? And I tell you what, I bet nobody who comes into Dover via dinghy gets spoken to like that. But it was something else that was said that was even more controversial. And Sir Michael Ellis, Conservative Member of Parliament, stood up in the House of Commons today and explained all.
Mr. Speaker, the terrorist attack of the 7th of October on Israel has provoked widespread anti-Semitism in this country and around the world, and the latest manifestation of this was at Manchester Airport yesterday, where Border Force apparently do not want Israeli Jews to enter this country. 2 innocent victims of the music festival slaughter were berated and told, and I quote, "We have to make sure that you are not going to do what you're doing in Gaza over here," end quote. This is to 2 victims of the Nova Music Festival. Blaming all Jews for the actions of their country is obviously anti-Semitic. These are people in uniform acting for this country as Border Force officers. It is a disgrace beyond all proportion. Their detention was clearly unlawful for several hours. They're being offered free legal representation, which I would urge them to take up. Can the Deputy Foreign Secretary confirm that Jews and Israelis are still welcome to enter this country?
Minister. Well, I thank my right honourable and learned friend for his extremely robust comments, Mr. Speaker, which are reflective of an absolutely outrageous, shocking and disgraceful incident which is now being investigated.
Well, I thought Sir Michael Ellis put that pretty well, and I sense that there is a growing prejudice against Israel and the people from Israel beginning to run right through our public services. Now, Naria and Daniel Sharabi will be on with Patrick Christys tonight. He interviewed them earlier on today. You'll get the full interview this evening, but here's just a snippet.
2 hours somewhere. He called us back and he say, Naria asked him, why are you doing it? What are we doing? What are we doing wrong? For what? Because we are Jewish. And this guy say exactly like this. We want to make sure that you're not going to do what you're doing in Gaza here. It's something that bring you up everything from October 7th. That you come share your story and then you face with antisemitism, not from civilians, not from people that think other way than you, from the officer.
Now, I'm all for Border Force doing their job. Absolutely. I'm all for strong borders. But if what has been said there is true, then it is pretty disgraceful stuff. And I'm going to ask you a question. Have we betrayed Israel? Some will think that's far too strong a question. But you know what? That's how it feels to me. I see a shift in our attitudes towards Israel and Israelis, and I see it from Lord Cameron right the way down through Border Force and our public services. Give me your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.com. Well, joining me to debate this is Ralphie Bloom, member of the management board at the Jewish Representative Council of Greater Manchester and Region. Ralphie, some will say, you know, that it's Border Force's job to be tough and make sure that people coming in do so with good reason.
And I would agree with that. But in this instance, look, let's put it this way. The UK has, as you've said, historically strong military security and trade ties with Israel. There's visa-free travel between the two countries. There should have been absolutely no reason for these 2 young men to have been stopped. Their passports should have been stamped and they should have been let through without any question. It was only when they were asked why they were here and they started to explain that they were survivors of the Nova Music Festival massacre. Actually, they're heroes. They saved dozens of people themselves. Yeah. And it was only when they explained that to the border officer that things began to go downhill. And there's absolutely nothing that should have meant they were detained for 2 hours. And that disgraceful comment at the end is absolutely beyond the pale. So I think it was done because they were Israelis, because they were Jews, and it's shocking.
I think your point actually is worth expanding, that when those paragliders came indiscriminately, massacring and injuring people, those 2 lads could have done a runner. Those 2 lads couldn't have, have gone for safety, but in fact they stayed, helped people, gave medical aid. You're absolutely right. They did play an heroic role, something perhaps that we ought to emphasise a little bit more. Ralphie, in the wake of October the 7th, there has been, I put it to you, a very significant shift in British foreign policy. in the attitudes of many of our public administrations, and I include much of the education system in this. And I don't know what you think, but I just feel there's a younger generation who just don't have much sympathy for Israel.
I think you're right. And I think I would even add something further to that, because this incident came not 1 week after a visibly Jewish young patient at the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital was treated in the most appalling manner by nurses who were wearing pro-Palestinian badges and paraphernalia, forced to be removed from his cubicle, have his cannula inserted on the floor. And this is a systematic problem that we're seeing on university campuses, that we're seeing in schools, primary schools, high schools, that we're seeing up and down the country. And it needs to be called out and it needs to be stopped, because it's already a distressing time to be a Jew in this country since October the 7th. We've seen a 4,000% rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Quite a few of them, by the way, came in the immediate few days after October the 7th, before Israel had even retaliated. These were anti-Semitic incidents by people celebrating the murders and the massacre of October the 7th. So you're absolutely right. There needs to be action taken to stop, certainly, government employees and civil servants from prejudice against Jews because of their disagreement with Israel's actions, Israel's rightful actions in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, I made the point earlier that it wasn't just Border Force, that this runs deep right through all of our public services. I talked about education, you talked about an incident that took place in a hospital, but the ultimate one is the police. And it seems that on our streets, you know, some of the most appalling things get chanted. From the river to the sea gets put up, you know, on the Elizabeth Tower beneath Big Ben. Not a single arrest gets made. Mayor Khan of London doesn't say a word of criticism about it. And yet when a bloke stands up with a Hamas are terrorists poster, he's manhandled to the ground by 5 policemen. Isn't it on the streets, Ralphie, where this needs to begin? Isn't it the attitude to policing that, above all, needs to change?
I think the problem, you're absolutely right. And I think the problem is that there's been no clarity with regards to what the law is and what the police can and can't do. And different police forces have got different views on some of these obnoxious anti-Semitic signs that we're seeing. I saw one in Manchester last week that said that Netanyahu is the Hitler of Gaza. Now, that's a clearly anti-Semitic sign, but no action was taken. Now, in Manchester, we do have a very, very good relationship with Greater Manchester Police. They have been outstanding in terms of the way that they've policed the community, secured the community, made us feel safe. But I think the problem is that there is inconsistency amongst police forces, and that is a big problem that we have and is allowing a lot of this Jew hate on the street. I think there's also a misunderstanding sometimes of some of the chants that are being made. For example, Chai B'Chai Ba'al Yehud, which is an ancient Muslim battle cry to murder Jews, calls for jihad and intifada. We know what the meaning of these are. These are calls for the murder of Jews. And I think there needs to be a consistent approach taken by police forces across the country, because these marches are making our city centres no-go areas for Jews every weekend.
Final thought, Ralphie Bloom, if I may. How pessimistic are you looking ahead?
We're proud British Jews. I'm a proud British Jew. I'm a proud Mancunian. Our community has made this city, the city of Manchester that I live in, the great city that it is. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to be pushed out by people who are anti-Semitic and prejudiced against us. But I think it's important to say that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine. It's always the first thing. It starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. And I think it's incumbent on everybody in this country to stand up to this Jew hatred that we witness on our streets every weekend, that we're seeing in our institutions, and saying enough is enough.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening on GB News. And, you know, maybe Ralph is right. First, they came for the Jews. In a moment, I'm going to tell you about a really good day for Donald Trump. No, I mean a really, really good day for Donald Trump.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Men's mental health. Men are starting to talk a lot more. You've been through a lot of stuff that people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, the last few years for me have been very, very difficult. People see me on tour, performing, making music, but myself and my wife, you know, we went through 2 miscarriages.
Wow.
You know, and you know, for us, that was a very devastating time and very difficult to know how to kind of process those emotions. And I guess as a man, I did the thing of bottling up my emotions, and where I feel comfortable to be able to express myself is in the studio, whereas, you know, she had obviously a different reaction to, you know, what happened to us, because not only was it happening to her mentally, psychologically, but it was happening to her physically as well. And I think something that she really wanted to see from me was that sensitivity and that emotion. And I thought that as a man, being strong was trying to bottle up my emotions and just show her that, no, you know, that I'm being strong for her. But actually being strong is talking about it. And what's happened ever since I've started to talk about it is I've spoken to more men that have experienced baby loss. My wife forced out of me, you know, how do you feel? And I ended up as a mess on the floor. I was exasperating, crying, almost inconsolable. She was just holding me in her arms as we cried together, and we cried together. And I didn't realise I needed that release so badly. Like I said, I've been able to speak to other men, and we've been able to cry together, and they shared their own experiences, which they did similar to me. But actually, you know, as men, I feel like that conversation and that sensitivity and being able to be emotional together.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, some of your thoughts on that Israel debate. Michael says, yes, we have betrayed Israel, which I find absolutely disgraceful and shameful. However, with Cameron as Foreign Secretary, I'm not surprised. No, you're quite right. And he's also gone completely soft on China. Funny that, isn't it? I'm not sure there's anything David Cameron as Prime Minister ever got right in terms of foreign policy. Quite why Rishi Sunak has chosen him to do this job is completely and utterly beyond me. Diane says, we are going soft on Hamas. There should be no ceasefire unless all the hostages are released. Diane, I agree with that, but to be fair to the UN resolution that was passed, that bit was included. But it's made no difference, of course, because Israel are continuing with their attacks. Their argument would be, if there's a ceasefire, it gives Hamas time to rearm and to regroup. And Ben says, there is no doubt in my mind that this border officer was being anti-Israeli and as such should be sacked immediately. I don't think somehow that is going to happen. Now, as you all know, in the run-up to the last 2 presidential elections, the king of Twitter, the global king of Twitter, was one Donald J. Trump. And, observers of the process would wait for that first tweet of the day. It would often come at 5:30 in the morning and very often set the narrative, actually, for the whole of the day. But given the way that Twitter, Facebook and the others treated him in 2020, and in particular the Hunter Biden laptop and not giving something that was true currency, Trump set his own thing up with a group of businessmen called Truth Social. And he set it up in an unusual vehicle. Well, that vehicle has gone public today on NASDAQ. And I think Donald Trump is going to be celebrating tonight. In fact, the money he's made on paper today dwarfs the fine that that he had to pay yesterday. Well, to explain all this, what it means, I'm very pleased to be joined by Jason Trennett, Chairman and CEO of Strategis, directly from New York. So, NASDAQ, what has happened on NASDAQ, Jason, and what is this vehicle that was set up to launch Truth Social?
Well, Donald Trump, as you know, as you pointed out, Nigel, was kicked off both Twitter and Facebook immediately following the 2020 election in January 2021. And he set up the Trump Media and Technology Group. There was a merger with Digital World, which is a SPAC, and it finally got regulatory approval a couple of weeks ago, which allowed it to start trading on the NASDAQ this morning. The stock now is currently worth $10 billion. President Trump's stake is worth about 60% of that, so about $6 billion. That makes his net worth about $9 billion. And to put it into perspective, the New York Times is worth about $7 billion. So conceivably, if he could use the stock as currency, President Trump could buy the New York Times, which would be quite an irony.
Well, that certainly would be, wouldn't it? What, I mean, I got the impression, Jason, and obviously I know that X is enormous, and so is Facebook and many of these giant companies, but I kind of had the impression that Truth Social hadn't really taken off. These stock market figures tell a different story.
Well, Nigel, you're quite right, though. I believe Truth Social only has about 5 million users currently, in comparison with Twitter, which obviously has hundreds of millions, if not a billion, users. So there's a long way to go. The company is not yet profitable, but it just got this infusion of cash, just became public, and so it now has the wherewithal, the capital, to become a real threat to other social media companies, in my view. And so the trick will be turning it into a real business. But they've got a tremendous head start with this capital infusion that they have.
So with a valuation of $5.5 billion for Donald Trump today, at what point, if he chose to, could he start to realise some of those profits?
Well, on paper, he would need to wait 6 months to get approval from. He would need to wait 6 months. Otherwise, he would need to get a waiver from the board, which on his board includes his son. It includes a number of members of his former administration. So it's not inconceivable that he could get a waiver before 6 months. So we'll see. But it's kind of amusing because I would say the liberal media here in the U.S. last week was almost line dancing with the prospect of him having to give up one of his properties or not being able to make one of these ridiculous legal settlements. And now here he is. He's back on the billionaire, on Bloomberg's Billionaire 500 of the 500 wealthiest people in the United States, with Truth Social going public this morning.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. Jason Trennett, thank you very much indeed for joining us live from New York. It all goes to show, folks, a lot of people have lost a lot of money betting against Donald Trump. Now, we debated earlier, the fact that many people, many Jewish people in Britain feel they've been discriminated against. It was rather backed up by the behaviour, I think, of Border Force at Manchester Airport, and British foreign policy has shifted. Have we betrayed Israel? Well, I'm joined by the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative, Abdullah Al-Andalusi, who's back on the programme. Do you understand why Jewish people in this country are beginning to feel threatened and very uncomfortable?
Well, I can't speak to people's internal mental states, but many Jewish people have told me that there's a propaganda that's incited by Israel, that Jews should not feel safe in the presence of people merely calling for the rights of Palestinians, that somehow the rights of Palestinians are inimical to Jewish nationhood, which is not true.
Isn't it?
And no, it's not. Of course, what the rights of Palestinians is inimical to
okay, let's just get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
So, would you recognise that, and we can argue about the borders, but would you recognise that the State of Israel should exist?
No states have a right to exist. People have a right to exist. States are imagination, are things we imagine in our minds. Are mental constructs. They don't have a physical reality.
Well, normally they do.
Humans have a physical reality.
They have mountain ranges. We're an island. So very often geography is a part of this too.
You're talking about the Earth's crust, right? And the Earth's crust exists indeed, and lands exist. But people exist physically, and people have a right to exist, whether they're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Palestinian, Arab, or whomever. And that is what this is all about. It's about the Palestinians' right to exist.
Israel exists
with dignity and equal rights.
Israel exists as a state. Does it have a right to exist?
As I said before, no state has a right to exist. Only people have a right to exist.
That's not really an answer, is it?
No, it is an answer, because if Israel is a state, it falls within the subset of states. If I'm saying that nation-states don't have a right to exist, people have a right to exist.
I don't agree with that at all. People form together in nation-states. The Jewish people have formed together and I understand, complex history over 2,000 years and all the rest. I mean, the point is this, Abdullah, that, you know, from the river to the sea, that was put up on the Elizabeth Tower, that's been chanted on marches weekend after weekend, even the kindest interpretation of that is that it is about the abolition of the current state of Israel.
Well, look, we were all about the abolition of the state of South Africa as an apartheid state, changing it into an inclusive state.
Which it is.
So now it is, yeah. But before, Margaret Thatcher and the Tories were all against that. So if you're saying to me that should we be against Israel is currently formed as an ethno-nationalist state, privileging one ethnic group, one group of Semites over other Semites, then I think this should change. All Semites in the land of Palestine, be they Palestinian Arabs or Jews, should at the very minimum have an equal dignity, equal tolerance, equal rights, and equal freedom to go about. The Likud party, why don't you condemn the Likud party, who's one of their formal statements and on their manifesto is from the Jordan River to the sea, it will only be Israeli sovereignty, right? So is that genocidal then? Oh, no one talks about that.
No. Look, I would love to see a two-state solution and a compromise, but my problem with this is, and we had, you know, Ralphie Bloom on from Manchester, and I know you were delayed getting here a bit earlier, saying that many of the other things that are being chanted in the streets, I mean, are basically death to the Jews. Do you understand why the Jewish community are concerned?
Well, if you'd like to show me video footage of anyone chanting anything that is a racist, or genocidal, and so on, if it exists, but guess what? I have not seen it. I've looked at all the footages, I've even looked at GB News' footage and so on, and you never see anyone, even you guys don't show anyone, citing racist or genocidal statements.
I think the
Are you saying that Free Palestine is a genocidal statement?
I think that the glider images on the back of the anoraks were pretty unpleasant, don't you?
Well, for one individual, the glider image, and the police dealt with those two individuals out of hundreds of thousands of individuals, right? Are you really going to judge a whole march of hundreds of thousands of people by one or two individuals, which the police dealt with?
We have showed a lot of footage over time of chanting in the streets, of many other things that normally would not be deemed to be acceptable. Where does all this end, in your opinion?
Professor, I'm just saying, is Free Palestine, saying Free Palestine, a statement that you'd condemn?
Not just Free Palestine on its own. No, it's everything. It's things that go around that.
Like what? The abolition of apartheid, of treating Palestinians as second-class citizens, of no-class citizens, administrative detentions, denying their rights.
The fact that from the river to the sea has some quite deep connotations when it's put in a pro-Palestinian context.
Yeah, freedom for everybody. But what's wrong with that?
The United Nations last night passed a resolution calling on a ceasefire. And I'm not condemning it because it did very explicitly say in the resolution that the hostages should be released. Do you think there's any possibility of negotiations with Netanyahu?
Well, that remains to be seen because his rather hard right stance of denying the Palestinians any state for themselves, denying them even a one-state solution or just giving them equal rights in the first place, because they say that would make a 51% Palestinian majority state, and they don't want that because of their ethno-nationalist, racist policies. This means that it's very difficult to have any hope with Netanyahu. All we can hope for is that the international community and many in the Israeli public themselves pressure the government to bring to the negotiations to free their the Jewish hostages that are held by Hamas and to free the 3,558 Palestinian hostages held by the Israeli government under administrative detention.
Whether the Israelis are racist or whether they're just battling for self-survival, surrounded by people and not too far away, Iran and others that want to destroy them, remains to be seen.
I'm not saying Israelis in general are racist. I'm saying that the Israeli government has very publicly avowed racist policies about wanting to maintain a Jewish majority. If that entails denying Palestinians equal citizenship in the territories that Israel claims are theirs. If you have people living in your territory and you say it's theirs, it belongs to you yourself, give them equal citizenship then. They don't.
I understand the boundary issue. I get that. Yeah. Abdullah, the only thing that your conversation with me proves, and equally the conversation we had earlier, is that there's no end to this coming any time soon, I'm afraid. In a moment, a change of tack. We're going to tell you what's been happening in the English Channel today and what it means for year-on-year figures. And we wonder why the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has gone so quiet.
Hi there, time to look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. Rain and hill snow across northern parts of the UK during the next 24 hours. Showers moving in elsewhere, although interspersed by at least some brighter interludes. Low pressure still well and truly in charge. That low mainly sitting towards the southwest of the UK, and it is sending a band of rain north during the evening into Northern Ireland, where some wet weather could cause issues, rain warning in force, as well as central and northern England, parts of Wales, and then eventually that rain moves into Scotland, where it mixes with cold air to give some snow above 200 or 300 metres. The far north stays dry but chilly. And further south, some clear spells, although the next area of rain moves in by dawn to affect southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Heavy downpours, gusty winds, and then that rain, well, it tends to turn to showers as it moves into central UK by the afternoon. Further showers arrive later from the southwest with gusty winds, hail and thunder. A lively afternoon, although with some pretty clouds in the sky. Now, in the far north, we're going to see wet and windy weather remain until Thursday morning, and then Thursday starts off bright across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, for England and Wales, a blustery start with further heavy rain to come, followed by showers, and those showers developing fairly widely as we go into the Easter weekend. I suspect Good Friday, Saturday and Easter Day. Mostly, we're going to see sunny spells and showers before more prolonged rain on Monday.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
On the 27th of December 2023, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, put out on social media, there are no small boat arrivals over Christmas for the first time since they started in 2018. Last night, our Border Force officers and their French partners worked together to stop a boat launching on the beaches. They played a crucial role in cutting crossings by 35%. I went absolutely potty with those comments because it was blowing a gale, 40, 50 mile-an-hour winds every day over the Christmas period. And in fact, he was community noted on Twitter, who said this winter is unusually stormy. But his ambitions knew no limits, because on LBC Radio in January of this year cleverly said, "My target is to bring it down to zero. I'm completely committed. My target is to reduce it to zero. To stop the boats, I'm unambiguous about that." I wonder how he's getting on. Come in, James Cleverly. You seem to have gone very, very quiet. Well, Mark White, GB News' Home and Security Editor, can tell me. Mark, how well is the Cleverly plan going?
Well, Nigel, I think what we're seeing today again in the channel, when 6 boats came across with more than 300 of these migrants making that illegal journey, and indeed for the year so far, is got to lay to rest the persistent claims from James Cleverly, the Prime Minister and others, that the government stop the boats policy has led to this reduction of 36% last year. It's true we had a reduction of 36% last year, but you and I and others that know the English Channel very well said that that was down to the weather conditions, persistently poor weather throughout large parts of the year last year, that meant that actually trying to cross the English Channel was very difficult indeed. And what have we seen this year? Well, on the days when the weather has improved enough, then the criminal gangs are pushing out these boats in significant numbers. We've had record numbers coming across. Now, for the year so far, including today's figures, we're up over 4,600. That's 1,000 more than this period last year. 25% more, in fact, have crossed this year than at the same point last year. So I think it makes it really difficult now for the government to continue claiming that it is the small boats policy that's stopping these small boats from coming across, because why would we be seeing it every time the weather improves, more boats on the way?
Absolutely. Mark White, beautifully put. Thank you very much indeed. Let's hear no more of this nonsense. We've approached James Cleverly for comment. I'm afraid he has nothing to say to us. We asked the Home Office on this, and a Home Office spokesperson said the unacceptable number of people who continue to cross the channel demonstrates exactly... Oh, I can't be bothered with it. It's an absolute waste of time. Now, let's move on, because it's utterly and completely pointless. They give us the same drivel every single time. Now, we had the resignation of the Minister James Heappey the other day. He resigned as Armed Forces Minister. Adam Cherry, GB News reporter, another quite well-known Conservative minister, goes today.
That's right, yeah, back-to-back resignations. We've had an emergency mini reshuffle in the last 90 minutes, Nigel. So,
have we? Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've had 6 people join the government. So, first of all, let's talk about Rob Halfon and James Heappey. So, we've had Rob Halfon resign as the Skills, Apprenticeships and Higher Education Minister. And as you say, James Heappey leaving as the Armed Forces Minister. He'd been in post for about 4 years, so he was he'd been in a continuity in this government at a time of such great change over the last couple of years, even as Labour said today in the House of Commons. Heappey had already signalled, as you said, that he was going to stand down at the next election, and so we were expecting that at some point. We didn't necessarily know it was going to be today, but nonetheless, it has happened. And Halfon's resignation is the one that's the bolt from the blue, completely out of nowhere.
So resigning, not standing at the next election.
Not standing at the next election, yeah, resigning effective immediately. And so we now have 63 Conservative MPs who have now publicly announced they're standing down. The highest number that have stood down in a single term is 75, which is just before the Labour landslide in 1997. Yeah, and you can see some parallels already. The truth is, I think by the time we get to the election this time, we're going to have a number that completely blows it out of the water. Way more than... They just don't want to embarrass the government by resigning all at the same time.
Right.
In theory. You think so. Why they've both resigned on the same day doesn't quite align with that, but there we are. So Mr Halfon said he was standing down. He quoted Gandalf in his resignation speech from The Lord of the Rings. "My time is over. It is no longer my task to set things to rights, nor to help folk to do so." So this is not a case of trying to stick one to Rishi Sunak. It's just trying to figure out what he's going to do once he's out of a job in November. Yeah. So we've had, as I said, we've had some new members join the government, including Jonathan Gullis joining as Deputy Party Chairman, Alan Mack, Kevin Hollingrake, Nasgani. Luke Hall replaces Rob Halfon is the Education Minister. And Leo Doherty becomes a new Armed Forces Minister. So new roster, our friend Leo Doherty.
The MP who wouldn't speak to us when we visited his constituency. Well, there you are. Now, the What the Farage moment today. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. And this comes, oh, dear, the NHS Suffolk and North East Essex Integrated Care Board and its spokesman, Dr Andrew Kelso, is warning us about the Easter holidays. Oh, yes. He said the average Easter egg contains around 3/4 of an adult's recommended daily calorie intake. I urge people to enjoy their Easter eggs in moderation and resist the urge to eat a whole egg in one go. I am sick to death of this nannying state. Give me an Easter egg. I've had enough. I can't put
I've come prepared, Nigel.
I can't put up with it. I'm sick to death of being told we can't do this, we can't do that. You know, it's Easter, for goodness sake. Why don't we just enjoy... very good indeed. I'm sorry, Dr Kelso, but you really bore the pants off me. I'm not in the least bit interested in your health advice. It's Easter. I don't eat chocolate every day, but I'm going to scoff all of this between now and the break when we come back to talk, once again, about slavery.
Earlier on breakfast.
Huge bridge in Baltimore that has collapsed after being hit by a ship. At least one vehicle has fallen into the water. This is an ongoing situation.
3 years ago, many of us said, the House of Lords Committee said, the Intelligence and Security Committee said that we had to regard China as a threat.
We do take measured responses, but we do take response. And of course, we will always be vigilant and always look to what we need to do. National security is the most important thing.
Whatever the semantics of it, you've got to put your national security first.
It's not about semantics, Jonathan, it's about money, isn't it? You can't afford to tell them off.
And she became all of a sudden, after a year and a half, this victim, she was a victim of trafficking. I'd never heard that for the first year of meeting her.
Singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Can you just let us know if there have been people getting into contact with you as a local councillor about how they feel about every lamppost, which is supposed to be public, neutral territory, being covered in these flags? Has it made some of your constituents nervous to walk the streets?
It's a complete range of people, including people who are from the Bangladeshi Muslim community who support the endeavours of Gaza, of what is going on, and are hostile to the actions of the Israeli government, but feel that they shouldn't have these flags on streets. I thought if you walk down some of the streets, it doesn't look like a London borough. It looks almost like what you would imagine in Ceausescu's Romania, with flags on every street lamp.
Well, Peter, can you let us know what it's like in the council and their activities in Tower Hamlets? How much time, for example, has been spent discussing issues relating to what's happening in the Middle East? Has it dominated quite a lot of time?
No. Let's be absolutely fair to the mayor and the administration. There's a heck of a lot to do in this council. We have extremes of deprivation and, of course, wealth because of the Canary Mawson City Fringe. We have huge problems on the council. And to be fair, the council spends its time doing council matters. And they said initially, in fact, absolutely carefully at council meetings, we can't interfere with foreign policy, but we got a lot to do on national policy and local policy. Let's concentrate on that.
So there hasn't been too much pressure that you can see from people living in the borough for the council to take a stance?
Members of the council and the administration have put their support. As I've said, we're talking of free speech. They're entitled to do that, but it's what happens where the council is responding to absolutely everybody, all 320,000 people who live in our borough.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Monday marked the 217th anniversary of the passing of the anti-slavery legislation in this country. That was the day 217 years ago that it got the royal assent. And, of course, it was William Wilberforce who'd campaigned from that ever since 1780. Wasn't just him, but he was the leading man. And yet, somehow, this debate just never, ever goes away. And overnight, we get yet another report and poll, this time from the Repair campaign. And this suggests that 6 in 10 say that descendants of enslaved people are owed a formal apology, and a smaller number think some form of financial recompense is due. Well, today we sent GB News' reporter Anna Riley to the Wilberforce Monument in Hull to ask passers-by if they supported the idea of an apology.
Should Caribbean nations and descendants of enslaved people receive a formal apology?
Yes, I think they should. Yes, it was terrible time, and thank goodness slavery is over. I think it should come from our government on behalf of us.
Of course.
To be honest, I wouldn't make a big deal of it. I think, quite honestly, a lot of fuss is made about it for countries that really now need to get their own act together for something that happened centuries ago.
I just don't know whether the money's there today, to be honest with you, but something has to be done. I believe that what's happening today in UK and how people of colour are treated makes me absolutely angry and furious that things aren't improving.
Well, I believe that the slavery's always been around, thousands and thousands of years, and it is today. Even we were slaves at one time. I mean, the Irish used to take us as slaves, for about 500 years. So it's happened to all of them, so I don't think they should stand out from everybody else.
Well, a range of opinions there. Now, this is going to be an in-house GB News debate. It certainly is, because Albi Amankona, host of the Saturday 5 and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, joins me, as does GB News presenter Nana Akua. Now, there we are, you see. We don't all think the same at GB News. You'd think to read some newspaper reports, we're all clones somehow. So, let's kick this off, Albi. Should we give an apology for slavery?
Well, look, I think we've heard a range of opinions there in the interviews that we had just seen, and it very much reflects some of the research that has been conducted in the polling that we've seen, where 6 in 10 Britons support a formal apology from the British government or the British state to enslaved people. Now, I don't want people to think of all black people as descendants of slaves. My family are from Ghana. I believe Nana's family are from Ghana as well.
Right, yeah.
We've got as much to do with slavery as you do, Nigel. So not all people of African descent have been impacted by slavery. Nonetheless, I do think these sorts of gestures are important, and I think it can help build a sense of Britishness in a part of the population which might not have always felt welcome in this country.
Let me tell you something that very few people know. I'm a nutcase historian, so I sort of know these very odd things. Because, we've already apologised. We did so absolutely formally. It happened in 1840. Prince Albert, on behalf of himself and Queen Victoria, gave a speech, and actually a very important speech, and a very progressive speech for 1840, and he gave it to the Society for the Extinction of the Slave Trade. Albert said, "I sincerely trust that this great country will not relax in its efforts until it has finally and forever put an end to a state of things so repugnant to the spirit of Christianity and the best feelings of our nature." And that's really my point, Albi, is you can't go on apologising again and again. Because if you apologise again, it suggests that the first apology wasn't sincere. Do you see what I mean?
I completely see what you mean, but I think there is
quite a big difference between saying apologise again and again and apologising twice. And I think that one of the things that we could do in this apology is actually talk about the fact that Britain played a key role in ending the slave trade. That there was this apology
and that's
from Prince Albert in 1840.
And that is very,
I think all of those things can be restated for the modern age, Nigel, and then we can finally put this issue to bed once and for all.
I accept 1840 was quite a long time ago. Whether our next presenter thinks that, we'll ask him in a moment. Nana, I mean, sometimes I would think with this debate that it was uniquely the British that invented slavery and barbarism, when, as one of the chaps from Hull said, this has been going on rather a long time.
Well, there's literally no race of peoples who have not been enslaved at some point by someone. And actually, if you go really far back to things like 1500 BC and all that, you'll actually find that there was slavery in Central and Northern Africa. And if you go slightly further back, the Egyptians had lots of slaves as well. So I don't see why someone somewhere should be apologising for something they literally have nothing to do with at all. And I'm sick and tired of it, actually. Why should anybody be apologising to anybody? And actually, it was the Africans. They have a slave trade. They still have a slave trade now. And if these people who are...
say things like
these
that.
virtue-signalling people who say, oh, we want another apology, we want another apology... Well, OK, lay down your iPhone, lay down the cheap clothes that you are wearing now, because a lot of them are created by modern-day slavery, and start dealing with the slavery that's happening now. I'm sick and tired of people asking for these apologies.
But if you make that point, you know, that it was Africans that actually sold the slaves to the British...
They did, yes.
I mean, everyone goes potty when you say it. One of the problems with this, Albie, is if we do repeat the apology, then the next demand is for reparations. It's almost never-ending, this, isn't it?
I take that point. I'm very staunchly against reparations, and I just think it would be totally impractical and unfeasible to be paying reparations to anyone. First of all, who do you pay it to? How on earth do you calculate that sum of money?
Well,
I think there's a very big difference, Nana and Nigel, between simply saying I am sorry for this act that happened in the past, and saying I'm going to pay billions or trillions of pounds to people who have got absolutely nothing to do with the slave trade.
But Albie, the very point you've made with regard to reparations, you don't know who should be paying who. Who are you apologising to? Who are you apologising to? Me? Is it you?
No, I've already made the point that it wouldn't be to us, because we're not descendants of slaves.
Well,
but
perhaps
it would
we need to apologise then, because our ancestors definitely
possibly
sold.
I think that is a conversation which should be had more broadly.
Well, that's right.
But I restate my point that I think an apology would be a good gesture to the descendants of enslaved people around the world, and also that it would be important to talk about Britain's role in the end of the slave trade in that apology.
But in this review, it's mostly, they said the majority of Africans, a lot of people who they asked, the Africans agreed that there should be an apology. Well, perhaps they need to go back and look at history. I think that a lot of the people in this country have been educated very badly with the history, because when I went to school, they started with the transatlantic slave trade, and there was no mention of any other slave trade before that. I think people are very ill-educated as to what happened.
And the most important thing, and to be fair, Albie did mention it, is the incredible work of the Royal Naval Squadron, who for nearly 40 years tried to drive slavery off the high seas. Thank you, folks, for coming in. I was just pointing out this 1840, this incredible apology that Prince Albert made.
It's very remarkable, because he's only just married Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
He, at that point, hardly speaks any English. He makes this speech in front of Robert Peel, various other luminaries of British society. It's incredible pressure on him, and he makes this phenomenal speech saying how wrong and unchristian slavery is and was. And I think that shows where Britain has been and where the royal family has been for a very long period.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. So, Jacob, what's coming up tonight?
Well, Policy Exchange has come out with an amazing report that says if we're to be carbon neutral in the grid by 2030, it's going to cost £115 billion. That's the Labour Party's proposal. It's not much better with the Tory proposal to do it by 2035. It's a little bit cheaper, but not much. And this is the insanity of decarbonisation. We don't have the money for it. We don't have the money to get defence expenditure to a proper level. Where is this coming from? How much higher will our electricity prices get if we're going to follow this crackpot policy? That's what I'm going to be starting with.
Yeah, and once again, of course, folks, guess who this really impacts the worst? Those on the lowest incomes, those on fixed incomes. The poorer in society are having a very, very tough time. Let's have a look at the weather. Maybe Aidan McGivern can cheer us up a little bit.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, time to look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. Rain and hill snow across northern parts of the UK during the next 24 hours. Showers moving in elsewhere, although interspersed by at least some brighter interludes. Low pressure still well and truly in charge. That low mainly sitting towards the southwest of the UK, and it is sending a band of rain north during the evening into Northern Ireland, where some wet weather could cause issues, rain warning in force, as well as central and northern England, parts of Wales, and then eventually that rain moves into Scotland, where it mixes with cold air to give some snow above 200 or 300 metres. The far north stays dry but chilly. And further south, some clear spells, although the next area of rain moves in by dawn to affect southwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Heavy downpours, gusty winds, and then that rain, well, it tends to turn to showers as it moves into central UK by the afternoon. Further showers arrive later from the southwest with gusty winds, hail and thunder. A lively afternoon, although with some pretty clouds in the sky. Now, in the far north, we're going to see wet and windy weather remain until Thursday morning, and then Thursday starts off bright across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, for England and Wales, a blustery start with further heavy rain to come, followed by showers, and those showers developing fairly widely as we go into the Easter weekend. I suspect Good Friday, Saturday and Easter Day. Mostly, we're going to see sunny spells and showers before more prolonged rain on Monday.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In